The Law of the Great Maw is coming with the Ogre Kingdoms in Warhammer 3, so let's take a look at the spells and see what they got. First up, Brain Gobbler. This is a -16 leadership penalty, which is very similar to Doom and Darkness from the Death Lawbook that we have in Warhammer 2, except it's a little bit cheaper at only 4 winds of magic cost compared to Doom and Darkness's 7, but it has a shorter duration than Doom and Darkness at only 18 seconds, but I think that's a good thing. This is a great spell for forcing a rout on a unit. If you target it and put loads of damage on it quickly, it'll take loads of leadership penalties, or if you flank it from the back, it'll take loads of leadership penalties, and this spell can be a good one just to push them over the edge into routing. As it's cheap and has a short cooldown, you can use it quite often, so it could be great for just forcing those routs on units that you've put a lot of damage on, or that are just on low leadership anyway. Because you don't really need a long duration for this spell. 18 seconds is more than enough if you find them in the right moment, low on leadership, and then you drop this. Those 18 seconds should be more than enough to allow you to push a unit into routing. So, a nice spell for the Ogres. I can definitely see it having some serious use against factions with low leadership, like the Greenskins, Beastmen, or Skaven. There is an Overcast version, but I don't have any visual of it, so I'm not entirely sure what any of the Overcasts do for these spells, but I imagine with this one, it probably just increases the duration. And then we have Gorge, another nice cheap spell at only 4 winds of magic, a little damage boost, melee attack and armor piercing damage, lasts 17 seconds, so this can add a nice bit of extra damage to any kind of fight really. If you're losing a fight, this can help turn it around. If you're winning a fight, you can win it faster with this. If you get a rear charge with some cav, you can pop it on them to help them do even more damage on their charge. So another nice cheap spell that you can spam around where it looks useful to use it. For an Overcast, again, I'm not sure, but I imagine it probably either increases the duration or maybe adds more melee attack and more armor piercing damage. And then we have Toothcracker, which I think is going to be essential for the Ogre Kingdoms when facing missile-heavy factions. As they're big targets and don't have a lot of shields, they're going to need this when they're moving the army up. It's an area effect, so it'll get a few units, gives plus 30 armor and 22 missile resistance, so that's really going to help them survive missiles on the way to meet the enemy army. It only costs 8 winds of magic, so not too much, and lasts 25 seconds, which is more than enough time to cover you while you close the distance on the enemy when you're within their missile range. So as I say, a great one to bring against missile-heavy factions, but one you probably won't need against a bunch of factions that aren't so good with their range, like the Vampire Counts, of course, Norska, the Beastmen, and I guess Warhammer 3 factions. Khorne isn't going to have any missiles, so you won't need this spell there. But against Kislev or Cathay or maybe Tzeentch, you might be needing this spell to save your boys from all the missiles. Overcast might increase duration or maybe give more armor or resistance. Then we have something a little bit more damaging, Bone Crusher. This is an explosion spell, as you can see. A big iron fist comes down on pretty much a single unit, as it only has a small strike area, maybe a couple of clumped up troops it could go on, but it does do reasonable armor piercing damage, 50% it says, so it could be good for taking out those more elite units. And at only 10 winds of magic cost, it's not too expensive, but not cheap by any means, but you could drop a few of these throughout a battle. Could really turn the tide if you can take out some of the more expensive and dangerous units of the enemy army. For an Overcast version, I imagine it will increase armor piercing damage. And then we have a very nice heal, something you don't see too often for a more bad guy-ish faction. Yes, I know they're kind of neutral, and yes, I know Nurgle exists, but in Warhammer 2 currently, bad guys don't really get heals. So Trollguts is a nice heal for the Ogre Kingdoms. It does 0.8%, which I guess means of a unit's health. So it'll refill 0.8% of a unit's health for 40 seconds. So every second, you'll get 0.8% of their health back. And that really adds up over that 40 seconds to around a few thousand health restored. So a very powerful heal, but a very expensive one as well at 16 winds of magic. So you'll only really want to be using it on your best units that can make the most of that magic that you're going to spend. So your large units, your Stonehorns, your Mournfang cavalry of different types, your Man-Eaters, all the strong stuff. The expensive stuff is where this heal is going to be best used. For an Overcast version, maybe it turns into an area, so you can hit a few units with this. That might be very expensive in Winds of Magic, I don't know. Or maybe it just increases the duration so there's more healing, but that seems like it might be wasted on one unit, as most units have that regen cap. We shall see. And lastly, we have the MAW, another explosion spell. This one with a huge explosion area though. As you can see, the big spikes coming out the ground. does about a third of its damage in armor piercing, so overall going to be a good one against clumps or groups of troops that it can really make the most of using all of that radius of. It is pretty expensive though at 20 winds of magic, so I don't think it'll get too much use in multiplayer because those clump up situations don't really happen too much. It happens a lot in campaign though, so it's going to be very powerful there when the AI likes to charge all its troops into the back of each other. This will absolutely ruin them. And an overcast version might again increase armor piercing damage. And that is all the spells in the lore of the Great Maw. So it's kind of a mixed spellbook. You've got some damage in there with the 2 explosion spells. You got some buffs. You've got some defensive spells as well though. Toothcracker to protect against missiles, and of course Troll Guts for the healing. So it should be interesting to try and find ways to make all these spells work well with Ogre Kingdoms builds. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. See you in the future.